This is the video for the Community Arts Grant in depth. So we'll be going in depth about the Community Arts Grant, which is a part of the Statewide Community Regrant program. If you have come to this video first, please go back to the first video, which is an overview of the full program, because there is important information that applies to this category in there. So Community Arts Grants, as I said, are our largest category. We receive the most applications for this, and they're the broadest in terms of what they can fund. So I'm going to now go over kind of the ins and outs of this program, how you apply, and the types of things that we typically fund. So they provide project support for arts and cultural activities open to the general public, with the purpose of providing artist or organization growth and public benefit to audiences, and to get artists and arts workers paid for doing their work. Grant awards are determined by a peer review panel made up of community members. The funding amount for the Community Arts Grant is $2,500 or $5,000. If awarded, applicants will receive their full request amount. There is no cash match required, and you'll see on the application, you will indicate which you are applying for, $2,500 or $5,000. I'm going to give some examples of previously funded projects. So what we're looking at on this slide is a great project that the H.A. Williams Myers African Roots Center in Kingston put on a few years ago, where they created large-scale puppets. And it was a great arts educational program about local important figures, especially related to civil rights and inclusion in Kingston and in the Punxsutawney area in Kingston. And it was just a wonderful educational program that was drop-in. You know, people could come in after school and participate. And so this is a good example of a workshop that we funded in the Community Arts Grant that really wouldn't have been eligible for our other category, the Arts Learning Grant, because it was drop-in. People could just, it was not the same group for every session. And it culminated in a performance, as you see here. Classical Connections, Afro-Atlantic, 21st Century and Beyond. This was a project organized by Gwen Laster at the Beacon Free Library. And it was a wonderful program, which was part performance and part history, cultural lesson, where Gwen Laster and her group, New Muse Quartet, performed selections from Afro-Atlantic composers. And in between each performance, they put up a slideshow and talked about the history related to that composer, and then performed one of their pieces. So just like really wonderful information, history, and then a live performance on top of it all. So that was a great program. We funded the Millbrook Literary Festival, which is a great festival that takes place at the Millbrook Library with various community partners, and allows local artists and artists that are coming into our region to present their work, authors to present their work, and writers, do readings, talkbacks, Q&As, and then have a book sale. And I'll say this is a good example of some question that comes up a lot, where is it best to only work with local artists, or to have is it okay to be paying artists who are not from our region? I would say it's totally up to the scope of the project, your stated goals, what you're trying to achieve, and both have been successful. If you really want to focus on paying local artists and working with local artists, that's great. You'll probably be able to make a great case for why that's important. If you only are, working with one artist or one group of artists, and they're all coming in from out of town, then you might highlight why it's important for the audience to have exposure to this group, and really talk about just more, this is increasing accessibility for the audience. Or you might be having a combination, which I think is the easiest to talk about, all of the benefits for both having local artists and artists coming in from outside the area. Beekman Library does a great outdoor music series, very straightforward, where they have a group of local artists performing in the summer, beautiful location with outdoor concerts, and people bring their chairs and just watch. And that's, the artists get paid through the funds. A few years ago, we funded Dusklit in Orange County, and it was a really cool outdoor performance art and really just multi-discipline art festival, where artists set up little booths or stands or, picnic blanket, and did some kind of interactive public art project. and then audience members could just walk around and experience them. So we loved funding this because it paid so many artists and a variety of artists working in mediums, and really challenged artists to follow the prompt of coming up with something that would be interactive to audience members when they were there. We funded for many years the Poetry Festival in Poughkeepsie, which is a great program led by Poet Gold and fiscally sponsored by the CUNY Hackett Arts Center. It's a great example of a long-term, successful fiscal sponsorship where CUNY Hackett had, fiscally sponsored Poet Gold so that she could apply for the Poetry Festival. It's a great, actually a really outstanding program that incorporates poetry, poets from all different walks of life and groups, working with local poets, working with youth, bringing in poets and performers from outside the region to provide really enriching experiences for audiences here, and really incorporating poetry, spoken word, music, performance. Really, really wonderful program that I'd encourage anyone to attend when it comes around this year. Common Ground Farms has gotten some funding from us previously to do their sustainable textile workshop series, which have included sustainable learning dyeing techniques, mending workshops, various forms. They have a farm where they grow materials that can be used as natural dyes. So it has this really great, like, hands-on on the farm and then actually using that in a studio environment. I like this example because it's a great example of a non-arts organization applying for these funds and really successfully doing an arts program. And part of their success is they really lean on their head teaching artists to direct the program and guide the program, with it being a great additional offering for Common Ground Farm that really aligns with their mission, even though their stated mission is not explicitly arts programming. And then Midtown Arts District and their program, the DRAW, Department of Regional Arts Workers. A few years ago, they did a great project, which was a costumed figure drawing workshop. So it was a more inclusive for all ages, and also inclusive of cosplay artists, costumers who could come in and show off their designs and create a set. And then it was, figure drawing series of sessions that were drop-in basis that you could come, for all of or just one of the sessions. So I like this example too, because it's a really great intersection of drawing and fashion, cosplay art, just really cool. Okay, so the goals of the community, I hope those examples gave you some idea of the scope and the breadth of what you could apply for here. I did not at all cover all the different types of programs that could be funded through the Community Arts Grant because they're so broad. But our overall goals are to make quality arts program available to all residents in our region, particularly to communities with limited access to the arts, assist with emerging arts organizations, individual artists, and grassroots groups to provide arts and cultural events, and support the cultural expression of our area's diverse communities, and support Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA, and disabled artists, support arts and cultural organizers from these groups who are leading this work. And so these are our overall goals. This is what the panel is considering when they look at the full scope of who they're going to fund. No one project can meet all of these goals, and you're not held to the standard that you're meeting all of these goals. It's really the program as a whole, and do all of these different projects fit together to make sure that Arts Mid-Hudson and our panel is meeting our charge. But it's important for you to be aware of this so that you can try to fit yourself in as a piece of us meeting our overall goals. So funding priorities are a little bit more specific, and they're if you can find one or two of these to really say that we are definitely meeting that funding priority, that's a good thing to highlight on your application. And so I'll start with new programming in our region or projects initiated by new applicants. Program support for arts organizations, small or grassroots organizations, and artist-initiated projects. So, of course, any nonprofit can apply for these funds, but it is priority to fund arts organizations, smaller organizations, or projects that are initiated by the artist. Support for arts and cultural programming of organizations or grassroots groups led by Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA, and or disabled arts workers, as well as hiring and paying artists who are part of those groups. Programming which engages underserved population and which demonstrates a strong, well-considered community outreach and promotion plan to reach those constituencies. I spoke about that and gave some examples in the last video about how you might think about very specific outreach methods, inclusion, and constantly be thinking about how can we seek some actual input from the group we're trying to reach instead of determining for them what will best reach them or what will be most relevant. Some mediums that we have funding priorities for are dance, film, video, media arts, writing, poetry, performance art, or any emerging arts forms. And we put these priority on these mediums because we just tend to see fewer applications. Which projects are eligible for the Community Arts Grant? I'll just state here, what's ineligible or anything that is not open to the general public. Please look at the guidelines for the Community Arts Grant for the full list of ineligible projects. You'll see there's a lot of overlap with what we talked about in the first video. Everything I'm saying in these videos and more is in the guidelines, so please take a look at that. Allowable expenses for the Community Arts Grant. So these are really kind of our expense priorities, what we would most like to fund with this funding program. First of all is artist fees. That is our #1 priority for these funds. And for, we'd love to see a large portion of funding in the budget be going toward artist fees. Community outreach, advertising, and marketing efforts, because that really directly leads into how you're going to get your audience there, and especially if there's any specific outreach methods you're going to take on because you're trying to reach a specific group. Direct administrative expenses or planning and preparation expenses for the proposed event, supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project, and any efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming. Some expenses that are ineligible in the Community Arts Grant category: purchase of permanent equipment items. Rental of equipment is fine, but not the purchase. Creation of textbooks or school materials, fees paid to board members of the nonprofit or nonprofit fiscal sponsor. And please, again, see the guidelines for the complete list of ineligible expenses. And that's a really good thing to double check as you're working on your budget. Inclusion and accessibility. All Community Arts Grant funded programs must be open to the general public. And as I said in the last video, we encourage thoughtful outreach to and efforts to seek input from all groups in our region and specific outreach and inclusion efforts to underserved audiences. Another note here for workshops. In the case of workshops and participatory programs, participant recruitment must be open to the general public. However, you might put appropriate age or skill level restrictions on participation. So that would look like, we're going to do this workshop series at a local library that are really geared towards elementary school students. And we're going to, we know that we can only take a maximum of 15 students per session for it to be feasible and reasonable for the teaching artist to lead. So then you might have an open registration process for each one and only accept students who are in that appropriate age range and have registered in advance. But the registration was open to the general public, and the only general public restriction is on the age level because it's what's age appropriate for the workshop. If you have any questions about this, please make an appointment and we can talk it over. Okay, now I'm going to get into what we have to go over every year. That is our most common question that we get: how you apply to this program, and really the 3 different ways that you could apply to the Community Arts Grant. And so I'm going to start with applying directly as a nonprofit because it is the most direct way you could apply, and go over the core of this, and then you'll see that the other ways that you apply build upon this. So eligibility for nonprofits. Must be a nonprofit or 501c3 organization with a primary address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. The nonprofit must have a board of directors, a non-discrimination policy in place, and be in adherence with the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. If you need any additional information on nonprofit best practices, we always recommend NYCON, New York State Council on Nonprofits. They offer tons of wonderful resources and a membership service where you can get direct assistance from them. Libraries, private universities, government entities, and tribal organizations are eligible to apply and have nonprofit status. It just might be a slightly different nonprofit status than a nonprofit that is set up as a typical 501c3. Organizations that are not eligible: public school districts, public universities, my apologies, New York State agencies and departments, including SUNY schools, and county level government agencies and departments, for-profit organizations and LLCs, non-incorporated chapters of organizations whose parent organization is not located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. If you have a question about this one, please reach out to me, but that would really be the case if you're, a chapter of a larger organization that doesn't have any kind of primary local address, and is not located all in our service area, other than, having a group that meets somewhere. You have to have a primary address in one of the 3 counties we serve. And then Arts Mid-Hudson, our staff and board are not eligible. So if you have applied to NISCA or Red C, you are not eligible to apply for the Statewide Community Regrant program in general, and of course the Community Arts Grant. If you applied for funding in fiscal year 2024, as I talked about in the last video, you would already know if you applied. And so you would be, you're not eligible if you applied for fiscal year 2024 for this year's program. If you don't apply for fiscal year 2025 to NISCA, then you would become eligible for us again. NISCA or Red C applicants may not benefit from a community arts funded program. This includes space rental, box office fees, or marketing as a part of their annual program. I will say, please read the guidelines for specifics on this. And if you applied and did not, just read the specifics. It's very detailed within the guidelines. If you're concerned that you're working with a venue, this mostly comes up for venues that applied to NISCA or received, applied and didn't get it, or applied and did receive it. Just look at what specifications are in place based on their status of receiving NISCA funds or applying. And if an organization applied directly to NISCA or Red C, you're not eligible to serve as a fiscal sponsor or partner organization for another application. If you're applying directly as a nonprofit, the attachments that you'll include on your application, in addition to entering in the application, is the staff list, board list, financial statement, and proof of nonprofit status. Staff lists just indicate whether your staff is paid or volunteer. And for board lists, include names and board details. And if you are a town or city applying, you do not need to submit a board list. Financial statement. So financial statement showing both income and expenses for the applicant's most recent fiscal year. Again, if you're a city or town submitting, you don't need to submit this. And you'll see that on the application. Proof of nonprofit status, we can accept a variety of documents depending on how the nonprofit status was set up for the organization. Just see the guidelines for the details on that. And it's also listed on the application itself when you go to upload it. So for nonprofits that are applying directly, you can also serve as a fiscal sponsor or a community partner for unlimited additional projects. I do not recommend doing a ton of additional fiscal sponsorship or community partnership, maybe 1 or 2, depending on what you feel the organization can take on. But just know that it does not interfere with your direct application. It's not going to necessarily harm your application. I get that question sometimes. Is it going to work against me if I fiscally sponsor this? I've seen more often than not, panelists appreciate that an organization is serving in that capacity and helping somebody else to apply. If you have any questions about I'm going to go into fiscal sponsorship in the next couple of slides, but if you're a nonprofit that's thinking about serving as a fiscal sponsor or community partner, and you want to talk to us directly, make an appointment, we can talk about what that would entail for you. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about applying as an individual or unincorporated group, and you'll see that there are a couple options within this way of applying. And as I said in the last video, all of these are, there's a variety of options in how you can apply. And I know it can be confusing and it's kind of bureaucratic, but it's really about just you identifying what option makes the most sense for you, and then going that route. And we can help, discuss it with you in a call and figure out what the best approach is. So individual applicants or contact persons for the unincorporated group must be at least 18 years of age at the time of submission and may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program, and must live in or have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. So that's the case if an individual is applying, they must meet those requirements. If it's an unincorporated group, you'll see on the application that's going to ask you to identify a key person, a contact key person. They are truly serving as the legal applicant because we have to be able to make the check out to somebody. So it will be in care, to that individual for that unincorporated group. If you have questions about this, just reach out to us. But then that person would have to meet these requirements. If you're applying individually or as an unincorporated group, then you still must work with a nonprofit in some way. And they would either be serving as your fiscal sponsor or your community partner. Individual applicants may designate a nonprofit they will work with prior to applying, or Arts Mid-Hudson will help to pair them with a nonprofit who will act as their community partner in the project once they are awarded funding. So what that means is if you want to apply with a fiscal, if you want to apply to this program and you're an individual and you are starting right now and you don't know you don't have a fiscal sponsor or community partner. First of all, I encourage you to try to secure a fiscal sponsor community partner. That is the more competitive way to apply. It is just showing more feasibility because that is already in place. But if something happens where you're just not able to get it fully confirmed, or you're not, they don't want to sign on fully until you're receiving grant funds, whatever it might be, or you're watching this video and it's a couple days before the deadline, then you can apply on your own, and you'll see on the application, it will ask you to just indicate that you're applying on your own and you do not know who is serving as your community partner yet. If you want to apply with a fiscal sponsor, and actually, let me say that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, if you apply on your own, we will only be able to help pair you up with a community partner. We will not be able to pair you up with a fiscal sponsor. I'll explain why in a moment, but if you're going in alone, just know that means if you are to receive funds, it will be a community partnership. Nonprofits serving as community partners or fiscal sponsors must meet all the nonprofit eligibility requirements in the guidelines as if they were applying directly, everything we just talked about previously. And you can see the guidelines for complete information, required documents. So now I'm going to talk about community partnership versus fiscal sponsorship. So in the case of community partnership, the individual applicant or the contact person for the unincorporated group is the legal applicant. We are signing the contract with you, and the funding is going directly to you. The check will be made out to that individual, and the community partner must be incorporated in the applicant's county of residence, and their role is to lend appropriate support to the program, and that level of support is to be determined by the applicant and the community partner. So they might be giving you some space to use for the event. They might be helping you market it. There's some kind of support that they are providing to the project. What's important to know about community partnership is the individual is the legal applicant, and the community partner nonprofit organization is not. So if you're approaching a nonprofit about partnering with you in some way in this project, and they are hesitant to be the fiscal sponsor because they don't want, you'll see in the next group of bullet points, for fiscal sponsorship, the nonprofit is the legal applicant. We're signing the contract with them, and the funding is going directly to the nonprofit. So if a nonprofit is averse to that, community partnership would really be the way you would apply, because then the individual is the applicant. Or if the individual is averse to having the money go to a nonprofit fiscal sponsor first, and you just want to have the funds come directly to you. So the key difference really is who is the legal applicant, who are we signing the contract with, and who is the check being made out to. So as I said, for fiscal sponsorship, the nonprofit fiscal sponsor is the legal applicant, and it must, contract will be signed by them and the check will be sent directly to them. The project must take place in the county where the fiscal sponsor is located because they are the legal applicant. The sponsored art individual or group must be located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, but does not need to be located in the same county. You'll see this. You'll see a lot more information about both of these in the guidelines. So if you're an artist living in Ulster County and you really want to do a project in Dutchess County, the only way to do that is to apply with a fiscal sponsor organization that is in Dutchess County, right? So that's kind of another perk of fiscal sponsorship. The fiscal sponsor is not required to make a financial contribution to the project. Applicants may select this option if they do not wish for grant funds to be paid directly to them, or if they require greater administrative support from a nonprofit organization. That's some of the reasons why you might elect to choose to do fiscal sponsorship over community partnership. I will say that fiscal sponsorship, again, the money will then be passing through their system and will be paid out to you by the fiscal sponsor, and they're assuming responsibility for the project by serving as the legal applicant. So it may take longer to get for them to approve that. They might need to get board approval. So if you're thinking of going fiscal sponsorship and you're seeing this early on, it's something I would recommend getting on right away. If you want to brainstorm organizations that could serve as your community partner or fiscal sponsor, that's a great thing to make an appointment to do, and we can discuss that together. Okay, so if you're applying directly with a community partner, or you're applying directly and you don't have any nonprofit identified yet, you'll need to attach a proof of residency. You'll see all the different types of documents that we will accept on the application and in the guidelines. It has to include the individual's name and address and be dated no earlier than 2023. So for example, if your driver's license was issued in 2022, please do not use that as your proof of residency. Instead, get a utility bill from 2023 or some other type of document that's dated 2023. Or 2024, if you want to use something very recent, that's fine too. Letter of commitment. When applying with a community partner, you'll need to include a letter of commitment. You'll find this on our website. There's a template, and you can just input your information in the blank areas. And you'll see that this is a very useful tool to help you lay out the terms of the agreement with the community partner. You'll attach it to the application. And it's a good thing if you're approaching a nonprofit to bring that with you and look at it together with them. You can find that on our website with all the other materials for this program. If you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, you need to provide all of the attachments that the nonprofit would have needed to provide if they were applying directly, because they're the legal applicant. So it's the same stuff we talked about before: staff list, board list, financial statement, proof of nonprofit status. The only additional one is a letter of agreement. Same thing as the letter of commitment that we just talked about. It's a template letter. You'll see it's very easy to follow. You'll just fill in the blanks of who's involved, and then the key points for your agreement. Explain how the funds will be transferred from the nonprofit to the individual or unincorporated group, and lay out the terms for the agreement. Again, you can find that on our website. Okay, some information. Again, the deadline is Thursday, February 15th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. It will close just before midnight. If you require assistance in completing the online submission form, please contact us in advance of the deadline. And I would like to just show you very quickly. Is this still visible when I jumped over here? Can you see the application now? Great. So this is what it'll look like when you go to the application from our website. It's going to ask you to confirm your address. For whatever reason, it seems multiple times, so just go along with that. If you're here, actually, I'll take a step back and say this website that you're being brought to is hosted by Submittable, which is a submission platform that we pay a fee to use their service. It is not our website. You know, we have access to the back end, but we're a paying subscriber to this. And if you're having technical issues, of course, reach out to us, but don't be surprised if I say that's unfortunately going to be a question for Submittable, because there's a glitch on their end. I'm powerless to do. I'm probably suffering from the same glitch as well. Thankfully, this is a very reliable service in our experience. If you are having trouble accessing your account, that would be something that you would go in with Submittable and reset your password. I won't be able to reset your password. I don't have any access to your account. Same goes if you want me to look at a draft. I can't see your draft. It's in your private account until you actually submit it to us. If you come to this website and you do not see this address, these address questions below, you'll instead see a prompt to make an account. So just make an account with Submittable. And this is very useful because then as you work on this application, the draft is saved here and you'll be able to see it and work on it over a period of time. So I'm not going to go through the whole application. I encourage you to come to a Q&A session, because that's when, if you have any questions about the application, I'll pull it up at the Q&A session and we'll go in depth about any of these questions here. And that's a lot of what we do on the Q&A sessions. But I do want to just jump down to a couple key areas and just point out a couple things. So the first thing is, if you see any questions that are a multiple choice and you can only pick one or the other, please click those off as you go. They may reveal additional questions. And we do this so that you're not entering NA for a bunch of stuff that's not relevant to you, and the application is really tailored to you, the way you're applying. So just make sure you're doing these as you go. I'm going to scroll down because I just want to show the budget form, and you'll hear me give a couple tips about the budget next. But I just want you to get a sense of what it looks like. It's a table that is embedded into the form, and it is asking you to explain the total amount that you are requesting from us. And that is it. It is not asking for a full project budget. It's asking for your grant request. So if your grant request up here, right, it's going to ask you 2,500 or 5,000, say it's 5,000, and say, I'm going to use a really quick example, say it's all going to artist fees. I would write here 5,000 under artist fees. You'll see that it will total at the bottom. Do not include any symbols like this. You see here it says 0. So it does, for whatever reason, Submittable gets very confused if you add symbols. So do not add any symbols here. That's very important. You'll see that that's also in the help text down here. Please only a numeric value here. And then a short explanation. So I might write 5 artists at $1,000 each. And then those 5 artists would have been further and more described in more detail above in the narrative. You'll see the next, so that all lines up, right? We're asking for 5,000 and we've set this to 5,000. I skipped this question, but I should have talked about this first. So say the total project expenses for your total project are $10,000. Okay. So we've indicated 10,000 for total project expenses. You're asking for 5,000. 5,000 is all going to the artist fee. Now you'll see this question: how will grant funds be spent? We ask this question because people leave this explanation column blank all the time. It's one of our biggest issues that we deal with when we receive applications. Please do not leave it blank, but it is our last way that if somebody has left this blank, then we can try to get that information out of them. So if you feel like you have answered this really well already, you might just write, artist fees, just reiterate it for the purpose of fulfilling this required field, and say, if you have any budget notes, you could expand on it, whatever it might be. Say it was instead 2 artists at $1,000, or let's say 3 artists at $1,000 each and 1 artist at $2,000. Then I might put a note that says, the artist receiving $2,000 is playing 2 shows, right? So explaining why is this one artist, you might write it a little less direct than that, but just explaining why. And then there's a final question. How will you pay for expenses not covered by your grant request from this program? So this is your opportunity to explain the gap. The total project is 10,000, you're requesting 5,000. So you might say here, remaining expenses, I'm not going to type it all out here, but you might say something along the lines of remaining expenses include space rental and marketing, and we'll be covering the space rental through ticket sales and our organizational budget until we recoup it from ticket sales. And we did a fundraiser, and that is going to be used to cover the marketing expenses, whatever it might be. And that then all of this in total represents your budget questions. So that's kind of the main area I wanted to point out here. I will also just give you an example of one. So, one of these questions, are there any pending lawsuits against your nonprofit? When you click yes, it reveals an additional question. So that's why it's important to do. Hopefully you don't click yes, you don't have that going on. And same here with these check boxes. Make sure you check these off when you're ready, and it will allow you to input the information for the nonprofit and do the uploads for the required attachments. Okay, so we just looked at, a couple things on the Community Arts Grant application, a couple notes about the budget, and then we'll wrap up talking about this category. So we really recommend that you work on the narrative and the budget together and check for consistency. I use this example at the beginning of the application. If you're going to use numbers on the budget, make sure they're consistent with any numbers or figures you've discussed in the narrative or in any of the questions on the application. Use the explanation column. Check the guidelines for allowable and ineligible expenses. A helpful formula is your total expenses minus your projected income should equal your grant request amount. And that is, through those budget questions that we just looked at that you demonstrate that. And please, at any time, ask us to review a draft of your budget. I really recommend working on your budget first and maybe even completing your budget first or getting close to completion, because that can really serve as a guide for the writing of your application and really what your application should be focused on is supporting the expenses themselves of what you're going to be. It's never a good thing when a panel, when the panel gets to the budget and they're surprised by something they see there as a line item because it hasn't been discussed elsewhere in the narrative. The review criteria for the Community Arts Grant, you'll see it's the same for all 3 categories, but they mean different things. Artistic merit, project feasibility, and impact. These are the 3 review criteria that the panel will score on. So it's they score on a scale of 1 to 4 for each review criteria. And it's really important that you be trying to aim to get the highest score possible in all these areas so that you're more likely to receive funding. So artistic merit of the track record of the organization or artist involved, of the work that's going to be presented and the quality of the experience that's going to be provided to the audience members. Project feasibility, does the project seem reasonable and likely to happen in the way that's described in the proposal? Does the budget make sense? The timeline makes sense? The key players involved seem capable of completing the project as described? And impact of the project, is this something that is going to have a strong impact on the artists involved, the audience, the organization, and just our arts and cultural landscape in our Mid-Hudson region? Does it foster a new or emerging artistic discipline or a new program? Be providing something that is not accessible to audiences or artists otherwise in that area? So think about that you're not duplicating already existing efforts, and you're really, how can you be most impactful? And is it serving, really any of our priorities for funding could have influence on any of these 3 review criteria, especially impact. And if it was funded previously, the panel may consider and may look at evidence of the project's growth from previous years. So first steps for the Community Arts Grant: secure a fiscal sponsor or community partner organization if you need one. Review the online application form and guidelines. I would recommend starting the budget first or just sketching it out. Complete the project eligibility form to get some feedback about whether your project is eligible, and organize digital copies of all required attachments. And at any time, make an appointment with Arts Mid-Hudson. I really recommend getting your attachments together early on so that you're not running around the last minute trying to get those together under a deadline. Okay, and that will conclude the in-depth for the Community Arts Grant.